Yeah. So today's agenda we'll be learning what are the type of projects we execute using big data. Okay. So it's important for everybody here, like not just data engineering, but data science also. Big data is very much tightly coupled with data science now. So let's understand like what are the type of projects we execute. It will not take much time. There are type of projects we execute using big data tech stacks. Okay. So first one is basically creating data pipelines. Some people say like we are creating data lake or warehouse or marts. Okay. So if you have heard about like people say like, yeah, I'm working on that data warehousing project, and he's a big data developer and he's saying, I'm working on a data warehousing project or data mart project or ETL project. So that means all this part basically. Okay. So that means that person is working on creating data pipelines. Okay. Pipeline as a normal English word, you can just relate it. So as we have discussed yesterday, one example, Reliance is having a couple of business verticals. Say Reliance Jio, Reliance Petrochemicals, Reliance Finance, Reliance Entertainment, and all these different business verticals. And suppose the business exits in, or the basically VCs want to take a bird eye view of the entire business, how stuffs are going on. So they will require a dashboard or a business intelligence reports to take business decisions on that. Okay, suppose they see like from Reliance Jio, just take the example like 5 years back when they started. Obviously, it is in loss. Like they're investing a lot of money, they're taking a lot of money from the market and investing. So it's a lot of losses are happening. So, but yeah, the forecast is basically 5 years. They have a strategy like after 5 years it should start generating money. Okay, so suppose Reliance Entertainment is making a lot of money. So let's take some profit from that and invest in Reliance Jio. Or say Reliance Finance is doing moderate level, let's don't touch it. Say Reliance Petrochemicals is doing phenomenally great, so let's take some profit from that and then invest in Jio, like that. So those kind of stuff. So all these big firms, not just big firm, all companies nowadays, they're creating business intelligence reports, and business intelligence reports or the dashboards are backed by actual data, isn't it? So if you're seeing some dashboards in the real time, for example, what we see yesterday, if you just search dashboard, all these dashboards what we are seeing, like if you have ever seen in the past, so all these dashboards are backed by actual data. Okay, so all these dashboards are backed by actual data, and this data is not available in a central location. Okay, for example, Reliance Jio, they have implemented their entire infrastructure in SQL Server. Okay, their entire database are a whole bunch of SQL Server databases. Reliance Petrochemicals is a whole bunch of Oracle databases. Like that, different businesses have different backend databases. And whenever a BI team is creating this kind of reports, they can't use this disparate database systems to create any dashboards. Okay, so for that we have to bring that data to a central location. Okay, I'm giving very high level overview. Like I'm just assuming like I'm explaining to a layman person who is not technical, not into big data, not into reporting. So I'm just giving you a very high level overview, and then we'll slowly get into that. So I'm saying all these dashboards, whatever you are seeing in the real time, these are all backed by actual data, and that data is not available in a central system. These are now available in different database servers and all. So that's why like so they will set up a data engineering team, or they will create a data platform where they will be creating different automation or automated data pipelines, which will automatically fetch data from all these production databases and put it into a central location. Okay, so you just fetch data from Reliance Jio. Okay, they have say suppose 4 or 5 MySQL databases are there. You just created a process that will every day fetch the data and put it into the data lake. Suppose again you created another few pipelines that will read data from Reliance Petrochemicals Oracle databases and dump it into your data lake. Okay, suppose you have implemented the data lake as a SDFS file system or Amazon S3 bucket. They are normal file systems which has infinite scalability. You can just keep dumping any amount of data, so it will support that. So post that you can basically merge multiple data together and create a warehouse. The segmentation is like that. All raw data you pull from different systems and you put it into a central location that is called the data lake. Okay, so the data lake is having different directories. The Reliance Jio is a directory. Inside that, the transaction data, B2B transaction data is one subdirectory. The B2C data, B2C transaction, that's a separate directory. Okay, customer data, that is a separate directory. Reliance Jio fiber users, that is a separate directory. Like that, you keep on adding new partitions or new files, daily incremental data into those directories. And similarly, for all these business verticals, you did that. Okay, then then further segmentation is called data warehouse. Okay, then you create a separate processes to take the raw data from the lake and create high level data sets or tables like called um, one second, I'm getting a call, sorry please. So basically you can just you can imagine like the entire data lake will be used to create further data warehouses. Data warehouses are basically subjected to different business verticals. You want to create a whole bunch of dashboards. So you read all these raw data from the data lake, which are related to only say Reliance Jio, and create a separate warehouse. Then separate warehouse means these are again whole bunch of tables, okay, whole bunch of fact and dimension tables. We'll come to that later. Just imagine like there are different sub data sets, but this is not very much normalized like your RDBMS. In RDBMS, we follow the 3NF, 3 normalized form or 2 normalized form or BCNF to create our ER or entity relationship. But this is very high level. Okay, means like the transaction table, B2B transaction table, B2C transaction table, Reliance Fiber transaction table, all will be merged as a single table, and that is called a transaction fact table, FACT table. Okay, similarly, you have a customer's data from Reliance Fiber, Reliance Jio, what do you call, it's a postpaid mobile user. So they merged together and you created a separate table called customer dimension table, like that. Okay, so this is called warehouse. Like you take a subset of the lake and you apply some data curation logic. Okay, you format the data and create a separate warehouse. And then further segmentation is called data mart. Okay, suppose Reliance Jio wanted to improvise their marketing system. Okay, currently they are following a traditional way to do the marketing or promotions, and they want to basically improvise that system. Okay, nowadays everything is data-driven decision. So what you did, so they just say like, yeah, the objective is to basically improvise the pricing and promotion or marketing stuff. Then you take a subset of the data and apply certain business logic and create a data mart. Okay, that data mart will be again used for creating custom dashboards to help the data science people or the marketing people to take better decisions, what better campaigning they can do, okay, or what better promotions they can come up with. Okay, that's the basically objective. So data pipeline means all these type of projects. Either you are creating a data lake or data warehouse or a mart. Okay, so that is one type of project we execute. So we create big data pipelines because the data volume is huge. These are great big companies and they have a lot of data and they have different systems, different database systems. So what we do, we read all this data together and create a data lake or warehouse or mart. That is one type of project. And second type of project, what we do commonly is basically called streaming pipelines. Streaming or real-time pipelines. Okay, this is again another type of project. So for example, I'll give you some examples. Say you use any credit card or debit card. You swipe your card, you go to any merchant, basically any store, and you just purchase something and you swipe your card for the payment. Now you can imagine, so your transaction data is going through multiple underwriting rules. Okay, it's not like very straightforward like some it's not like a grocery store where so I said Tata Salt is a product and you just purchase multiple packets and it will be deducted from their warehouse. It's a financial data, so it should be very careful. Like every transaction, every time you swipe a card, almost like it undergoes like 30-40 underwriting rules. Within a fraction of a second, all these things are getting validated. So in the backend, like if anybody get a chance to work on fintech or finance company, you might have seen like they have a separate underwriting rules in any finance company. You'll see there will be a separate underwriting rules. They generally identify or they create the rules. Okay, they basically create the rules for every other transaction. Okay, so how the transaction, in order to approve a transaction, it should go through a couple of rules, or basically a rule engine. Okay, so when suppose I'm using a credit card and I have been using credit card since the last 4 years, 5 years. Okay, so the bank, the underlying card provider, they already know my basically expense pattern. Every month I generally spend say 20,000, 30,000 from my card, and roughly a number of transactions is kind of 50 transactions every day. And what you call, say the on an average transaction is say some 5,000 rupees or 4,000 rupees. And what else? Say my maximum transaction is say 1 lakh rupees. 95th percentile is say 50,000 or basically 10,000, and fifth percentile is say 100 rupees. So they know all about my details. Okay, they know like entire execution, means the entire spend pattern. Grocery shops I go like monthly say 10 times or like 5 times. Medicine stores I go say 2 times. So different attributes they already have. Okay, suppose and basis that they have created their underwriting rules, okay, for different customer segments. And now all of a sudden, like there is a transaction happening on my card, okay, from say one of the store there in Hyderabad, some ornament or jewelry shop, and it's a 2 lakhs rupees transaction. They will not immediately approve it. You'll immediately get a call from the customer care asking like, is it a legitimate transaction or not? So how they are knowing that? Okay, so all these things are basically streaming applications. Okay, on the fly, your transaction data is being processed, and they identify whether it's a valid transaction or what's the probability that this particular transaction is not a legitimate transaction. So basis that they act upon immediately, a customer care or ticket will be raised to the customer care, and they will call you immediately, or immediately a call will be made, and then once you pick up the call, it will connect you to some customer care. Okay, those kind of systems are basically real-time pipelines that is on finance data. Mostly many people will not get a chance to work in finance data, but nowadays it's very common. If you get a chance to work on any IoT companies, as in all these bike sharing companies here in India, Rapido, this Yolu and all. So they are the biggest users of streaming applications. Okay, so on the fly they have to manage everything, like where their vehicles or their bikes are going. Okay, so how much time it's underutilization. Okay, how much time it's idle. Okay, so if the bike is going outside of their radius, all these things they are tracking in a real time manner. And in e-commerce portals, again common use case, like if you remember, if you have seen, like every time you do search any products on flipkart.com or amazon.com or .in, so you will see like immediately after like once you come out of that page, so you'll start seeing those kind of product ads in other pages also. Okay, so you can just imagine these e-commerce platforms, they are nothing but their job is basically to connect the buyers and sellers, isn't it? So to connect the buyers and
Siddharth, this finance related example, just repeat it once. Just want to
okay.
understand, like, yeah.
Okay, so every time a transaction is happening, every time you are swiping your card there in any of these merchant, so your transaction record goes through multiple underwriting rules. Okay, so your transaction has been, you just swipe your card will go through all these steps. The first step is, so is it less than the 95th percentile of your transaction? Is it more than your 5th percentile of your transaction? Okay, so then your count of transaction of this month, suppose on an average you do 20 transactions on your card. So is it the number of transaction is more than 20, less than 20? Okay, and say category wise, like suppose you have done 5 categories of transactions, say grocery, medicines, and say what else? Say bike servicing, car servicing. So those kind of categories of transactions are there. So is your transaction is under that category or not? Okay, so city, suppose I reside in Bangalore, so all these transactions are there in Bangalore. If the city pin code is one of the pin code in Bangalore or not? All this, like you can just imagine your records, one transaction record is going through all these if-else checks. Okay, if it passes through all these checks, then only this transaction passes through. Otherwise, they just block your transaction, and a ticket will be raised immediately on the fly, and you will get a call
Uh,
from there.
here, just a point I could not understand. So
Mhm.
for every transaction, one instance is created.
Correct.
So for one instance, suppose underwriting happens. So
Mhm.
how it is considered as a streaming?
See, we are not the only person using this. Let's just take the example of Visa card or Mastercard. There are
Okay.
millions of users, isn't it? There are millions, tens of millions of users, and you can see every time one or transaction is, means every millisecond, thousands of transactions or lakhs of transactions are happening. So you might have like register your cards or auto payment of different cards. So like you can imagine like means Visa has to track like almost, you can just search Google search their transaction per second TPS or their TPS. It's more than 1 lakh or 10 lakhs kind of. Like every second they are processing tens of lakhs of transactions, and all these transactions should go through all these underwriting rules, isn't it? So don't you think
Yeah.
like if for 5 minutes their system is down, so they may lose a lot of money. If you are just following this PayPal story and all, when this what you call this Elon Musk and Peter Thiel they started, they first solved this problem. They first introduced this email-based transactions, and they saw this kind of fraudulent transactions every month. They're basically losing a big amount of money, and then they created the fraud detection system. Like on the real time, you have to detect the transactions, basically status whether it's a legitimate transaction or not, and you have to intelligently stop the transaction if it is fraudulent. So now this is not limited to these big companies. Every other small companies, if you are going through, like there are many Indian startups who are providing credits and wallets. I myself is also working in a similar form. So it's a common scenario, common use case. Okay, when a transaction is initiated, so it should pass through all these steps. Otherwise, you will see immediately, if there is a small loophole identified by the fraudulent users, they will start exploiting the system. Okay, for example, if you are tracking that in the real time, for example, I will say its significance. So if you are tracking it in the real time, say there is one dashboard here. Let me show you that this one. Suppose this is this is basically a line chart which is showing a transaction pattern. Okay, this is basically a line chart which is showing the transaction pattern, and they're monitoring in the real time. So they see like there is steady line, like every day they know like there are roughly a million transactions is happening. So suppose for few seconds or for few minutes there is a sudden peak, that means your system got hacked. So all these finance companies, they track their businesses in this way, or it will automatically alert a mail to the entire business team and the technical team since there is a what you call some anomaly or anonymous transactions are happening. So on our average, like they generally see a number of transactions, say 1 million transactions per second, but all of a sudden it's spiking up to 1.5 million or 2 million. That means is this a festival season like in India, like say October month, all these e-commerce businesses they run different campaigns. Is it a festival season? Then yeah, it's normal. If it is not a festival season, that means there is some fraudulent transactions are happening. Okay, you have to immediately stop your service for a few hours to basically track like what is wrong or what is right, isn't it? So that those kind of examples are typical examples of streaming applications. Your transactions are automatically getting streamed to Kafka, and Kafka is basically integrated with your fraud detection system, and your fraud detection system identifies like this transaction is going through is a valid transaction or it's not. So those kind of use cases. Does
Uh,
it make sense?
Sorry to interrupt you here, but I've heard about the mainframe system because from the background. So it's
Mhm.
basically the validation programs which will handle all these things underwriting at the same time. So
Correct.
DB2 itself has that much capability to handle it because in an instance, it handles 50,000 plus transactions at an instance it handles. So what's the basic difference? I just want to understand, like streaming transaction here in big data engineering, and there the validation there it happens. So just trying to correlate.
I,
So
I I got your query. I got your
okay,
query. Yeah,
okay,
it's a common scenario. So what
okay.
happens? So for example, you are saying say you are using mainframe systems and it has a capacity to basically validate 50,000 transactions per second. So that is one level. Suppose one system is doing all this validation. So for one system, they can make 50,000 requests per second, and your DB2 can handle that. Imagine just it's not just fraud detection systems. You are doing also some real-time analytics. Okay, you have location service enabled. Okay, you are basically tracking the devices when a person is moving around different places. Basis that you want to send some targeted SMS. That can be another use case which is trying to leverage the same database. Now the number of hits went to your DB2 is now 50,000 plus 50,000, that is 1 lakh. Now say there is a third system which is also using the data. So they are basically trying to see real-time monitoring. They wanted to do location-wise what is the transactions going on, and what are the different campaigns are going on. They want to connect the users of different locations to the right campaigns going in that particular area. Okay, suppose you are traveling from one city to another city, and there are some good restaurants out there, and those restaurants are merchants of your card. Suppose you are Visa card provider, and you have tie up with those merchants, and that merchant is running one campaign, say 20% off for Saturday, Sunday, or like basically for this particular festival week. So you want to send those campaigns to those users. You can imagine like same data is used by multiple vendors now, multiple systems. So the same DB2, which has a capacity of say 50,000 transactions per second. So now they are basically exposed to 10 times more transactions. So those will not support. So infinite scaling is not available without infinite scaling, or kind of this huge scaling is not available on any standalone system. Okay, so when you are looking for horizontal scaling, so one system, it is fine. When the same data is being used for different analysis, different real-time analysis, so that system will undergo 2 times, 3 times more, 4 times, 10 times more workload. Okay, those systems doesn't support this. So in that case, like we have to think of like using some streaming applications. We have to think of some distributed message queues and distributed stream processing systems. Okay, we have to basically route the same transactions data. Means when the transaction is basically logged to the database, immediately you just log it to a distributed message queue like Kafka, or basically Kinesis, or Google PopSub. You just add that data, and now those systems are having kind of infinite scalability. Okay, now you have 10 analytics systems who want to consume that data and process it in the real time. They can, instead of hitting your DB2, they can hit to Kafka message queue and they can start processing it. Okay, now you just basically bifurcated the systems. Instead of hitting the production database, and now they are using the distributed message queue like Kafka, Kinesis, and all to do the analytical use case, to run the analytical use cases. Getting my point?
Yeah, I got your point. Like scalability of processing a data is increased in tenfold. That is one benefit of it.
Correct. Yeah. Any other points? There can be many such analysis. I'm just trying to give very high level overview. And this Kafka, you can see like there are. This is not like kind of like messages are generated and it just once it is consumed it is disappeared. No, it's not like that. It just stores the messages permanently in the local file systems, and there are different rules also you can mention, and you can basically implement your entire rule engine in Kafka also. Kafka has this KSQL, and KSQL basically you can join or you can merge multiple data sets together, and on the fly you can make some decisions. Suppose rule engine what, like you have multiple business logics and you have to just club them together to create a bigger system. The entire system can be implemented in a streaming manner also there. So in Kafka itself, if you have a huge Kafka cluster, they can, a 10 node, 100 node, 1000 node Kafka cluster, you can implement the business logic there also itself. It also supports SQL. You have to add the plugin KSQL, and you can start doing your analysis there also. A lot of things are there. It's not just limited to that. And 50,000 is fine. 50,000 is nothing. Just take the example of Amazon.in. So every second, kind of like millions of transactions are happening. Not just if you just see.
What I said, like it was a 50,000 as a computer instance, not a second per second. It's a system instance. That is less than like there has some quantity defined. So that is also very good in like processing data sensor in the mainframe itself. But here the scalability, I'm getting the main feature that at the parallel
speed,
exactly. At the parallel time with the distributed data system, you are processing similar data in like multiple different ways.
Correct.
Fine, I'm good.
Okay, so some more examples also you can think of, like take the example, say e-commerce portals like Amazon.in. Suppose there is a million transactions happening every second, but there are more than 20, 30 millions of events are happening. I'm just opening Amazon.in and searching for a phone. So you are opening Amazon.in, you are searching for say some household grocery product. Okay, so all these different millions of users, like in India, they are searching through different products in Amazon.in. So you can imagine, like, their job is basically, they're not selling anything by themselves. Their job is to basically create a handshaking between the buyers and sellers. I'm looking for a phone, so I have a budget of 20,000, and Amazon have a lot of like hundreds of mobile sellers are registered with them, and there are different sellers are running different campaigns at different time point of a year or different time point of a month. So Amazon is the middleman. Their job is to basically connect the buyer with the right seller. Okay, I'm looking for 20,000 rupees mobile, and it should be having say 8 GB of RAM. It should be having storage say 200 to 56 GB. Like that, I have this kind of requirement. Processor should be Qualcomm, and they are basically and there are different sellers. Different, say Samsung is being sold. Samsung different varieties of mobile is being sold by one seller, another seller. One seller is running a campaign at 10% off if you are purchasing it through CityCard. Another vendor is basically saying like you can purchase the same product using SBI credit card. We will be giving you 10% off. So, and Amazon knows like you basically make the payment using SBI card or Citi card or HDFC card. So they will show you the right relevance so that the sale will happen as soon as possible, and they will get the commission. So now you can imagine tens of millions of Indian users are using Amazon.in, and you can see every person is basically spending on an average half an hour in Amazon.in. So you can see how many user event. I'm just opening this page. So this is being captured. I'm moving my cursor from this product. Suppose this is Amazon.in. This is one mobile. This is another mobile. I'm just moving my cursor. That is also being captured there. Okay, that means I'm moving my cursor here, means I'm trying to see like what is the price and all. You know, like if you just hover your mouse there, a pop-up will come saying price this, and specification this. I'm moving here, like it will show this mobile, what's the configurations and all this. So you can see these are all in the backend. They're capturing all this information. Okay, if you ever get a chance to work in this kind of user activity data, so each user activity data is a huge JSON file, JSON document having a lot of information. Your user ID, your basically current location, and how much your basically which product you are basically hovering on, how much time your mouse is there, and from this page to the next page when you move, how much time you spent on this page, and what is the next page you went to. All these information are being captured, and they have their recommendation system in the backend, which is running 24/7 on a real-time manner. It's all personalized recommendation. They immediately start showing you the right recommendation, so that basically, so whenever suppose I'm now searching some different stuff. So I'm searching like say JSON parsing in Spark data frame parse JSON. So I'm suppose going to some other page. Okay, when I'm going there, so you will start seeing some other pop-ups like saying Amazon.in is selling say Samsung N30 price is say 18,000, and if you just use Citi card, you will get 10% offer, and if you just exchange your previous old phone, you may get up to 3,000 off also. Okay, so all these kind of things, you can see like all these pop-ups are coming, no? So these kind of pop-ups are coming. These are all basis those analysis. Okay, and these are typical examples of streaming application. Every other ad tech company, advertisement technology company, they are the biggest users of streaming. Okay, all these IoT companies like Yulu and all this Yulu, Rapido and all these e-commerce portals, big e-commerce portals who have a lot of money to spend and create these intelligent systems. Okay, and these banking systems for sure, yeah, they have their fraud detection systems. Okay, all these are kind of typical examples of what you call typical examples of streaming pipeline. Okay, so data is being generated on the fly at every millisecond or every second. The humongous amount of data are getting generated, and you have to process it instantaneously and make some business decisions. So that's all about your streaming applications. And then the third type of use cases are basically productionizing machine learning use cases. So what does that mean? Basically, all these examples what we discussed, now suppose a recommendation system. This is one of the example of what you call machine learning application only. So suppose time forecasting. Okay, so forecasting means suppose I've worked on for some use cases like forecasting Surf Excel. Surf Excel is a product from Unilever, and you have to basically forecast like every next quarter, like in India, like how much of tons of, not just India, in every other city they have different city-wise factories, so or state-wise different factories. So in every state, how much of tons of Surf Excel will be required for the next quarter or next month. It sounds funny, but supply demand supply chain work in that way. So you have to accurately forecast like what's the market demand will be in the coming few months. So basis that you have to manufacture. Okay, suppose there is a requirement of 100 tons of Surf Excel for Karnataka. Okay, so you have to basically plan accordingly. You have limited number of factories. You have, say, in Karnataka you have 3 factories which has to manufacture 100 tons of Surf Excel for the coming quarter. I'm just giving a very hypothetical number. I don't know exactly how much required. So they have to just plan accordingly. Factory has a limitation, like they can a single factory. They have 2 big factory and 1 small factory. This big factory can manufacture say 50 quintals of Surf Excel in basically say 1 day. Okay, so basis that you have to plan your workforce. Like some factories has to run basically month means every day say in a full time, and small manufacturing companies has to run in 2 shifts. The worker should come day shift as well as night shift, run it twice to manufacture to meet the requirement. So these are basically very careful decisions you have to make, because you can imagine that's basically decide their revenue factor. So if they over manufacture, suppose they wrongly identified like it's not 100, it's not actually 100 tons required, rather it's say actually it's 80 ton required, but you over manufactured 20 tons. So what happened, like every other product is having an expiry date, and also you have to spend money on the warehouses or godowns. Once you manufacture it, you have to store it somewhere. It's not like in the factory you just keep it. Factory is meant to just manufacture, so you should be having the godowns. And like if you store it in godowns, you have to pay monthly rent, isn't it? So there are different godowns are there, so you have to pay it some charge at a daily basis, some charge at a monthly basis. So if you over manufacture, you have to pay extra money to the godowns. Basically products will not be sold, so it will get expired, and you have to waste those, you have to spoil those products. And at the same time, if you under manufacture, suppose there are actually 100 tons required, but you under manufactured only say 80 tons. So what will happen? So that means 20 tons are deficit. So what will do? So suppose customers are going to supermarkets and all, they are regular users of Surf Excel. They find like for this month Surf Excels are not available in different stores. They just thought, let's try another product, say Ariel or some other detergent, say let's start using. And what happened, like they started using it and they liked it, and also they saw that the price difference of 10 rupees. So like these customers will say, yeah, let's stop using Surf Excel, let's start using Ariel. You get my point? So all these use cases, these are typical use cases of like machine learning applications. You have to accurately measure, like estimate how much of demand will be there, basis that you have to manufacture. Over manufacturing will cost you, and under manufacturing will also cost you. Okay, so all these things we have to basically do. So traditionally, the machine learning people or the data science people, they create these models. Okay, they create a machine learning model. That's an application, you can say. At the engineering front, you can say they just create an application, but these are not like Java, Python applications. These are data science, some mathematical algorithms they used to create those models, and those models has to be run or to be executed every month. Okay, so you can't just execute the same current month forecasting you did, and today you cannot do the forecasting for the month of December or for the month of 2021 January. So you have to first see the data, then only you'll be able to forecast. Okay, suppose in order to forecast the Surf Excel's requirement for the month of say October, I need to see all these transactions till August. Okay, so till August transaction data I will take, then only I can say accurately forecast for the month say October. Okay, so that means like unless and until I don't have September month data, I won't be able to forecast November month data. Unless and until I have November month data, I won't be able to forecast 21st January forecast, okay, requirement. So those kind of systems like that means a dedicated data science person have to retrain the model every month end to basically get the data. So nowadays, like businesses, how the things are getting evolved. So Spark and all these different frameworks like Flink, they are also coming up with this machine learning libraries. Okay, you can basically automate their model. They don't have to pay a machine learning person means throughout the year to. They are basically highly paid. You can't just pay them every month just to retrain the same model. You're not doing any research. You are basically running the same model again and again, and for that, you are basically maintaining a highly paid resource in your company. Rather, you can automate it, so it's automatically every month that report will be generated and it will be circulated to the business team, and they can plan their inventory accordingly, isn't it? That is one use case. Another can be what? Another can be say uh, so basically, earlier, like people were doing machine learning on small amount of data. The traditional machine learning tools are basically SAS. If you have heard about it, SAS, R programming, Python, scikit-learn. Okay, there are a couple of other tools are also there. People were using those kind of tools to do this machine learning analysis. Just like we are using Apache Spark for big data processing, Hadoop for big data processing, Flink for big data processing. Similarly, data science people, they used R programming, Python, scikit-learn, SAS. These are the traditional tools people use to do that, and these are all standalone systems. This has to run on a single machine. Okay, you have to procure a big server, and on that server, these models will be running. But nowadays, you see like every other business is generating terabytes and petabyte scale data. Okay, now machine learning is not just limited to a single system. It's not limited to the laboratory only. Now small firms are also trying to do intelligent machine learning to improvise their business. Every other startup is spending a lot of money on the data analytics, AI, and all this. Okay, so now the question is basically how to do the same machine learning models on this huge data. So for that, this distributed computation framework like Spark, Flink, and Hadoop, they came up with their own machine learning libraries. Okay, which is so Spark itself is a distributed computation framework, and it has a capacity to process the computations across multiple computers. Now the same machine learning model what you were doing earlier in a single standalone machine, now you can do it in a multiple computers also. Okay, so now basically that is one thing. Okay, so what happens like the projects look like one machine learning model has already been developed, say one forecasting problem. Okay, it has already been solved, and what you have to do, you have to basically distribute it. Okay, you have to take that code and you have to rewrite the code using Spark MLlib, okay, or Hadoop Mahout. Okay, you have to use any of these libraries to redesign or redevelop the same machine learning application. Okay, and then obviously you have to automate it just like the normal data pipelines you're automating. So similarly, this machine learning pipeline also you have to automate it. Okay, that is also another kind of use cases. Okay, so these are the three type of use cases I personally has worked. So I just give you those examples. And another few examples which are basically hypothetical, like I have not yet seen, I practically didn't use anything, but
Siddharth,
yeah, yeah,
Siddharth, I want to interrupt you here. What is
yeah,
the
please.
difference between the conventional predictive analysis and
Mhm.
this one, the machine learning test cases you used?
That's what I just told you. Means traditionally people generally use standalone machines, standalone machine learning models. You want to create a regression model or a k-means clustering model, or you want to create a deep learning model. So the libraries were limited to single machine. You have to write the code to say estimate like what's the requirement of Surf Excel for the next month. So you write that piece of code that will be using say last 2 years of data or 1 year of data. And by using last 1 year of data, say the volume of the 1 year data is basically say some 100 GB of transaction data. So this 100 GB of transaction data you just used to create a machine learning model. A lot of computation required because all machine learning models in an iterative manner. You have to keep on iterating to basically fine tune your model parameters. Okay. Now basically I'm saying like take the example say Swiggy. Okay, Surf Excel like once like a person is going to a supermarket purchasing 1 or 2 packets in a month. Take the example of Swiggy Zomato. So at a daily level, like all these youngsters, all these software people, they are ordering food thrice a day, 4 times a day, starting from like breakfast till evening. So you're purchasing, you are ordering everything. Now you can imagine the quantity of orders. Like if you 100 GB of data for 1 year to estimate the next month of Surf Excel requirement in the Karnataka market, Now you can imagine like if some forecasting problem or forecasting problem being solved by Swiggy, how much of data they have to process. They may have to process like 100 TBs of data. Okay, 100 times more than Surf Excel. It's common, right? And basically, suppose now basically you can imagine like you have to process 100 TBs of data. Obviously, not a single system can manage this. Doesn't matter you procure any supercomputer and all, it cannot be solved using a single computer. You have to think of some distributed systems like a Spark machine learning library or Flink machine learning library or basically Hadoop Mahout. You have to use those kind of distributed computation system to build those models. Getting my point?
Yeah.
Okay, so the volume of data what you were using earlier for like machine learning using this SAS, R programming, Python, scikit-learn, now you are doing the same thing using distributed computations like Spark, Flink, and Hadoop. Nowadays, like if you have heard like, yeah.
Here, apart from distributed and having a large volume of data, other than that, there is no difference.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah, that's the major thing. That's the major thing. Like that's the major and that's the most differentiating factor. Like imagine like I'm one of the what do you call the directors or the technical leaderships there in Swiggy. I know my business is generating 100 TBs of data, and I want to create some intelligent models to stay ahead in the market. If I can upfront estimate, I need in the next month, say November month or October month, I need how much of delivery guys I need. Okay, on an average of till now, I just have to pay say 10,000 delivery guys, and I know like suppose next month the estimation like the requirement will be more or less. This is that I have to create that workforce. It shouldn't be like I have a requirement of 15,000 delivery guys, but I have only 10,000. So I'll be losing those businesses, right? So for me, like for solving that problem is more critical. Okay, and I know like it's 100 TBs of data, and my data science people who are R programmers or SAS programmers, none of the single tool can support. They can do any time series model forecasting using this much of data using R programming. So I'm stuck there. Okay, so I have to think of some alternative, like what are the other technologies are available, what are the other resources, skill sets are available in the industry, so that I can hire them and I can solve this problem. Okay, that's one of the biggest factor here. Okay, so when the data is huge, you can't do any machine learning using SAS and all. You have to think of using some distributed systems. And it's not just a small point, it's a huge point. It's a differentiating factor. Okay, so if you just stick to SAS, that means we are dead. Like we can't move ahead. We don't have any other option to solve this problem. But at least like if these distributed computations are there, and they also provide the similar algorithms, like all these time series, like ARIMA model, and all this. These are available in Spark. So let's use Spark to solve these problems. You're getting my point, right?
Yes, got your point. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So these are the basically kind of problems what I solved, and there are a couple of other problems like graph processing. I'll just use graph processing kind of, and then some ad hoc analytics, and what else? Yeah, these kind of things like which are common generally. Graph processing, I never get a chance to work on that. Graph processing is basically the data is not two-dimensional, not like a record sitting there in RDBMS. Rather, this data is basically a graph database where the data is stored as different nodes, and these nodes are related or linked with other nodes through links. So how to do graph mining to find out some intelligent patterns? That is another type of use cases. Again, I'll not be able to give much example, but yeah, we can see like all big companies, Facebook and all, they do recommend friends and all. That is through a lot of graph analytics. They basically understand the pattern of different users, how a person is basically linked with different other users, what's the common features between them, skills wise, experience wise, location wise, and all this. This is that they have to recommend you the friends so that you can basically spend more time on their website and they can make more money out of you, isn't it? That's the whole idea. So that is graph processing. And ad hoc analytics. Basically your business, you are working for a startup and they're going for a funding, VC funding, and they want some quick analysis. They want to get all these numbers. Okay, suppose Swiggy is going for a say Series 3 funding, and they basically want to and they just want to figure out the numbers, what the numbers they want, they can showcase to the vendors or the VCs. They just ask you, can you quickly give me the total volume of transactions we did, some count, total active customers every month, on an average monthly, how many average customer count is there, okay, and then how many new customers getting acquired every month. All these metrics they will ask you, and you don't have to create a Spark application to end-to-end production ready application. Rather, you have to simply just create a Spark application, notebook based applications. We will be using notebook based applications for a few sessions. You quickly do those ad hoc analysis and just find out the numbers and share with them. Then they can create some PowerPoints and all. They can present it before the VC team. Okay, so these are the different kind of use cases we solve using big data. Okay, now you might be, so on most of the data engineers, you have to spend most of the time using the first two things. And if you are getting into some analytics, you will get the third part also. Again, this ad hoc data analytics is very common. Okay, it's very common. So whenever you are starting a project also, we do some EDA, exploratory data analysis. These are also coming under this ad hoc analytics. You have to quickly identify the data. We have to see how many anomalies are there. Some data sets the business has just shared with us or the client has just shared with us. And to find out like the data is clean or there are many columns having empty values. Okay, or the transaction they have told like it's last 10 years of data, but you saw last middle few months data is missing there. All these kind of analysis you have to quickly do, because you can see like once you start a project, first 1 or 2 weeks you spend time doing brainstorming, understanding their problem statement, understanding their data sets. So you have to quickly do some analysis, find out like what is missing, because you have to take a formal sign up, and then you have to start doing the coding part, isn't it? So those kind of ad hoc analysis also we do using this big data technologies. Okay, so these are the different type of use cases we work. Along with that, yeah, that is one thing. And post that, I'll quickly go through Spark's official documentation site. Spark is just new, not just new, it's a 10 years old technology now. So if you just search, because the first stable version came in the year of 2011. So Spark doc, if you just search it, no. So the latest version is 3. So I have not started using 3. I am still using 2.4.5. We'll be using 2.4.5. I'll come to that. Why we're not using. It's not just Android app like you have to always download the latest version. So a lot of things are there. It's programming. When you are developing an application using Spark, it's not just Spark. There are a lot of other third-party tools. Also, integration is also required. So you need to do the compatibility analysis. Spark version 3 is compatible with which version of the Redshift connector, which versions of AWS SDK, which versions of Google Cloud's SDK. So you have to do all this compatibility analysis. Okay, every time a new version get released, in order to get the corresponding other libraries for the compatibility stuff, it will take another 6 months or a year. Okay, so we are still using 2.4.5. Okay, so which is pretty fine enough. So this is the official documentation page of Spark. So here they have mentioned everything, how to download Spark, how to run some sample examples and all this. Okay, so that is that. And what else? Launching a cluster. There are different type of clusters are there. Clusters is nothing but multiple computers connected with each other in a network. Okay, I'll come to that in very detail. So we will be spending most of the time developing the application in a standalone mode. Means we'll be doing all this setup in a local computer, and we'll be writing the program and execute it. And we'll spend 2 to 3 sessions how to run the jobs on EMR cluster, Elastic MapReduce cluster, which is nothing but a Hadoop YARN cluster. Okay, so all these projects till now, like with like my kind of 7 years of experience into big data. So I've seen like all these projects we execute on YARN cluster only. You use AWS EMR cluster, it uses YARN in the backend, yet another resource negotiator. Okay, YARN cluster. You are using Google Dataproc, that is also using YARN cluster in the backend. You are using Azure SD inside, that is also using YARN cluster in the backend. You are using Cloudera, Hortonworks, they are also using YARN cluster in the backend. Okay, all these cluster providers, they are using YARN cluster in the backend. But nowadays, a new emerging technology is coming, that is Kubernetes. Just now, like last month only, I finished one project that is Spark on Kubernetes. It's kind of hot technology these days, but you will not find any. If you're stuck somewhere, it's very difficult to find the solutions over web. So it will take time to come to the market, but yeah, I'm creating a course on that, Spark on Kubernetes, which is very hot, very latest in this days. But yeah, Yarn is still fine. Like Yarn is still there for another 10 years. So this course, like we'll be learning like Spark on Yarn only. Okay. So Yarn means you are running locally, that is standalone mode, and you'll be deploying the job on EMR cluster, that's the Yarn cluster. Okay. And Mesos is basically it's a high scalability cluster. So it's still theoretical. I have just heard. I never used it. So people say like whenever you have tens of thousands of nodes cluster, nodes means computers. Okay. So when I'm saying like 10,000 machines or 1 lakh computers are connected with each other to create a cluster. So Yarn cluster is not the best clustering software. So people use Mesos there. Okay. People use Mesos there. Mesos is again another clustering environment, clustering software. Okay. That is there. Okay, that is there. And what else? Suppose that these are clustering systems they have mentioned, and these are the different modules of Spark. Okay, so this is nothing but this page is nothing but quick start page, and the other modules are mentioned here. You can see RDD accumulators, broadcast variables, Spark data frame dataset, structure streaming, Spark streaming, MLlib, graphics, Spark card. Okay, these are the different modules of Spark. So what we'll be learning? We'll be learning the first module, that is RDD, accumulators and broadcast variables, SQL data frames and datasets, structure streaming. Okay, these are the 3 modules we'll be discussing. And what about the other modules? So Spark streaming and structure streaming, these are 2 streaming frameworks. And these streams or Spark streaming is the legacy version. Okay, it is Spark 1. Okay, we are using Spark 2, so we'll be directly starting with the structure streaming. Okay, so trust me, like people are also using structure streaming since last 5 years. It's not new. Okay, and this stream is way more older. So we are using structure streaming for this. And MLlib is for machine learning, so it's a data engineering course. We are not spending time on MLlib. But yeah, if some people will show some interest, then I can show you 1 or 2 examples. And graphics, it's still in beta stage. This is for graph processing. And Spark R, as I mentioned, like R programming is basically used for data science people, for the machine learning people, they do R coding. So this is the distributed version of the R programming. Okay, the same R program what you were writing earlier as a statistician or a machine learning or a data science person. So now you can think of using Spark R, which is the distributed version of the R programming. Okay, that is that. Okay, these are the different modules of Spark and different languages. Okay, it's just a distributed computation framework. Spark is a distributed computation framework, and it supports multiple languages. You can write Spark program using Scala. You can use Java, Python, R programming, SQL. So here we will be using Spark with Python. Okay, so that is PySpark we call it as, and the SQL also is common for all. Okay, we'll be using all this. That is there, and deployment guides. Okay, how to deploy your applications. All these parameters are mentioned here. We'll go through that, and monitoring, tuning guides. All these things we'll be discussing. How to monitor the jobs, how to configure the Spark Submit or Spark job, tuning and job scheduling, how to schedule the job. Okay, security part will not spend time because this is DevOps work. Hardware provisioning, all these things part of clustering only. Okay, and third-party projects also will be using a lot. And yeah, and external resources. These are different resources you can follow to learn Spark. So this is the official landing page of Spark. Okay, we will be using, as I mentioned, we will be using the first 3 modules of Spark as a data engineering profile. Okay, that is there. And with that, yeah, so we finished the types of projects and we finished the Spark part. And yeah, AWS also, I think you have AWS account by any chance, Manasis?
No. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. It's not a big deal. Okay, fine. So I think I've shown you yesterday, like what are the services we'll be discussing. That is AWS EMR cluster, Elastic MapReduce, AWS Lambda, that is the serverless scripting, then AWS step functions to create an orchestration or a state machine, and CloudFormation to create a cluster, CloudWatch to schedule Spark job or a cron tab. These are the different services from AWS we will be using, and EC2 also. Okay, that is there. And what else? Okay, that is there, and what else? Yeah, so these are the different stuffs we'll be using, and with that I need half an hour to execute the program, so I have still another 20 minutes. So let's start with the basics of big data. Okay. So here inside that we'll be learning two things. That is distributed computation and distributed storage. Feel free to interrupt me, okay? Just like any questions coming to your mind, just interrupt me. Not just it's a pretty much interactive session. In fact, I will see, like, if you don't interrupt me, you will be losing a lot of things. So I don't have to say that once you start doing hands-on, for sure you will be interrupt me. Otherwise, in a single day, I'll execute 10 programs and you'll be completely lost. Okay, so don't shy out. Okay, and as I mentioned, there are hundreds of programs out there. At least 100 programs we will be executing. So yeah, so let's start with big data concepts. Like we saw, like what do you call? We saw the different stacks or different tech stacks we will be using. So let's be very particular about the wordings. Okay, let's follow like what wordings I'm using. So let's use the right wordings, okay, to create a feeling like you are a real-time working guy. Because I'm assuming like everybody will show minimum 3 years of experience when you are going for job interviews and all. So let's use the right wordings, okay. So we have covered few steps. What are the different modules of Spark we will be using, AWS we will be using, what are the type of projects we execute, and now we are starting with the distributed computation and storage. Okay, distributed storage is pretty much like everything. Like I don't have to mention it. Distributed storage is basically, suppose you are using a computer. Say this is a Windows computer. Okay, this is a Windows computer, and you go to this PC. Okay, and it's showing like you have 5 drives, C, D, E, F, G. Like you have like kind of 4 drives. Okay, I'm assuming this is a 1 TB hard disk, and 1 TB hard disk has been divided into 5 sub disks. Okay, that means each is having roughly 200 GB of hard disk. Okay, 200 GB of space. Now, suppose in this particular computer, suppose I'm assuming like, suppose, yeah, this is 129, this is 187, and this is 111 GB. Suppose I give you a single file having size 200 GB, you will not be able to store it in this computer. Even though you have total 1 TB of hard disk, if suppose I'm giving you 2 GB of data as a single file, you won't be able to save it here, store it here. Okay, because we have further broken it into smaller chunks, and each chunk is less than 190 GB. So if somebody is giving me 191 GB or 200 GB of data, you will not be able to store it. Okay, so Windows uses NTFS file system, Network File Transfer Protocol. The file system, this is nothing but a file system only. Okay, this is nothing but a file system only. So Windows uses NTFS file system, and NTFS file system doesn't have so it has a limitation. So if you have just create different drives, you have to store data less than that, less than or equal to that size of the hard disk, or basically drive. Okay, so similarly, if you're using Linux, also same thing, like it's a single computer, the root directory. So whatever, suppose you have 1 TB of hard disk, so you can store maximum like less than 1 TB of file there. Okay, and when suppose somebody is giving you, let's do some processing on 100 TBs of data. So the example what we were like discussing for Swiggy and Lysis, we want to process some 100 TBs of data. So definitely, it's a single computer cannot handle this much of storage, isn't it? A single computer cannot handle this much of data. So for that what we have to do, so a single computer cannot handle this huge amount of data. So you have to think of like how much you can scale it. Maximum you can procure a computer having 2 TB of hard disk. Like if you are going for any PC like personal computer, I'm assuming you will not get more than some 2 TB or 5 TB of hard disk. So if you are working with hundreds of TBs of data, so a single computer will not help. So you have to club multiple computers together to form a bigger computation unit. Okay, you just procure 200 computers. Each computer is having 1 TB of hard disk, and you connected them together through a router, through Ethernet cables, and you created a network of 200 computers. And you basically now you have collectively received like 200 TBs of hard disk. Now you can store some huge amount of data, which is not just limited to single computer. And similarly, computation wise also, for example, yeah, there is a famous story. Let me quickly tell you. Scale up versus scale out. For example, so just imagine like 20 years back, like one of your friend or your family person who just joined HDFC Bank, okay, as a data analytics person or a data engineer. So your job is basically his or her job is to basically take the production data, extract it, and do some reporting. You have to find out like total month and month sum of transaction, count of transaction, new customers acquired. Similarly, quarterly and annually, you have to calculate all these matrices and to share it across with the business team. Okay, so they have given you a Pentium 4 machine. At that time, Pentium 4 was going on. Each computer is having say Pentium 4 processor and say 256 MB RAM. Okay, so the data what you are processing is few hundred MBs. So you are able to write the program and execute it. You are using Python at that time, and you executed that job here, and you shared the data, the output to the business team. Okay, so you continued that for a year or two, and then what happened is HDFC is a pretty aggressive bank. They did a lot of development. Now their business is tenfold. Okay, earlier we were processing some roughly 200 MBs of data. Now it's became say kind of like 2 GB or like 5 GB of data. So you just reported the same to the business team. The business team just tell you, yeah, it's a banking firm. We have a lot of money. This data is very important to us. So you just raise a ticket to the IT team. They will give you a bigger computer. Okay, so what you did, you handed over this processor to the business team. The IT team, they just gave you a big machine, okay, which is having say 10x more capacity. It's not a Pentium 4 machine, rather it's what you call say dual core machine, okay, dual core or core to duo, having two cores and say 4 GB or 8 GB of RAM. So you are happy, the same program is running fine on this big machine. So your work is seamless. So what you did, you again after 5 years, what happened? Your data is basically becomes again another 100x. Okay, so a lot of digitization you did. So all these things are happening digitally now. So you have now a lot of data. So let's basically move this data to. So you again reported the same thing. So I'm not able to process my Python code here on this machine. So your business just told you, let's raise it to the business IT team, and they just gave you a new machine now. Now you're happy. Okay, same thing is happening. Again after 5 years, same thing happened. Again data just increased to 100 times. So you raise the IT team. IT team is saying there is no such computer available in the market. You want to process 10 TB of data on a single machine, and that means roughly you require a computer having say some 20 TB or 50 TB of hard disk, and say RAM say 10 TB of RAM, and say 5,000 cores processor. So those kind of computers doesn't exist in the market. Okay, so does that mean business has to stop this activity? No. So there basically distributed computation comes into picture. Okay, so this kind of like increasing hardware of a single computer is called scale up. Okay, you're vertically scaling up the processing capacity of a single computer. Now you're coming out with the scale out solution. Scale out solution is basically when you realize the processing more processing requirement, just another computer get added to the cluster, and you created a cluster of 2 nodes. Okay, then you need more storage, more computation. You add another machine. Like that, you can keep on adding machines. This is called horizontal scaling. Okay, you're horizontally adding computation units to your cluster to get a bigger computation unit. Okay, that is all about your what you call. That is all about your. This is all about your this particular called horizontal scaling or scale out solutions. Okay, this is basically used for so all these big data applications we are saying these are distributed computation frameworks. Spark, Hadoop, Flink, these are all distributed computation frameworks. So these are basically nothing but on this concept only. But here you must have realized one thing, like here Python, Java, or C++ programs you are running, Now, how to run the same program here? Same Python program, how you'll be writing here? Same Java program, how you'll be writing here? Like all these programming languages are designed to run on a single computer. Okay, you cannot just ask your cousins or your siblings computer, and you can just connect these two computers through a LAN cable, and you execute one Java program here in this computer, and you will expect that this execution will happen in both the computers. That doesn't happen. Okay, no magic will happen. So because this all programming languages has been designed to run on a single computer only. Okay, these will be running on a single computer only. So that means in order to utilize this horizontal scaling or scale out solution, you have to learn a special type of framework. Okay, this traditional programming languages, database queries, mainframe, this will not help us here. You have to learn a specialized framework to make utilization of this kind of infrastructure. Okay, I just set up a 100 node cluster or 1000 node cluster. How to use the capacity of this 1000 node cluster? For that, I have to learn a special framework that is called Spark Hadoop framework. These are the different frameworks which supports this thing. These are not languages; these are frameworks. We'll come to that later. But for now, just remember, like all this Java, C, C++ programming, this will not be running. This will not be able to run in this particular machine, this particular environment. You can run C program here, run here, but you cannot run one applications here and expect that it will be running by both the computers. Okay, this is not possible. Okay, for that you have to learn a special type of software or programming frameworks called basically distributed computation. Okay, Hadoop, Spark, Flink, these are the common examples of this kind of frameworks. Okay, that is that. And along with that, what else? Okay, so without further delay, yeah, somebody saying something? Yeah, so that is basically the distributed computation framework. So what we'll be doing, so let's use Databricks Community Edition. Anybody registered here? Manosis, did you register here? If you have not registered, you can register here. This is a free cloud Databricks company, as we discussed. These are the founding team behind the Spark project, and they are giving free clustering software. Okay, so this is Databricks Cloud. Okay, they provide a free one node cluster for the developers to practice this. Okay, so what we'll be doing, we'll spend some time first create. So you can just register it. Okay, there will be two options. Okay, I'll just say you quickly. Kishore, you are saying something. Can you please tell me the difference between Hadoop and Spark? Definitely, we'll come to that. Just allow me some time. 1 second. Let me just open it. So just if you just search no Databricks Community Edition, if you just search it, second link you have to just click. Here this page will come. You just click sign up. Okay, you just wait. Try Databricks. Okay, you have to fill your details. Okay, you have to fill your details, and then you have to I'm just showing you one thing. Yeah, so once you put your information, so it will come into this way. Databricks platform free trial, and another is community edition. Just make sure you are going ahead with this. Okay, this is free only for 14 to 15 days. You have to use this community edition. Okay, it's free. Okay, but limited feature, but it's free. This is very difficult. You have to just integrate with Azure or AWS, but let's use this one. Okay, so once you use this get started, then basically you'll get a verification email, and you can just verify it, and you can use it now. Okay, time to check the email. Okay, that mail doesn't exist. Okay, so once you register there, then you can log in here, and you can see this is the official landing page of Databricks Notebook. Okay, Databricks Community Edition. Okay, it's a framework that is available for free to practice Spark programs. Okay, so it's an initiative by the Databricks company, as we discussed yesterday. Matty Jaharia, who is the founder of Spark project, he developed this entire project as his PhD project, PhD in MIT. So it's his own company, Databricks, and they are providing a free one node cluster. Okay, they're providing a free one node cluster to practice Spark program. Okay, to practice Spark program, they're providing this. So once you log into this, you will get into this particular page called landing page of Spark, and in the left hand side you can see there's a black ribbon. Okay, and there's a cluster options is there. You can click it. You can click create cluster. So I'm creating a cluster test. So you can see one driver, 15.3 GB of RAM, 2 cores, which is sufficient for us to practice any program. So I'm clicking create cluster. It will take few seconds to create a cluster. Okay. So along with that, let's try some other program. Okay.
So Siddharth, I have one thing.
Yeah, please.
Does that Azure have some kind of tie-up with this Databricks, because we can see that feature in Azure? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, exactly. So not just Azure, like Databricks is a third-party tool for basically developing Spark application. Okay, so that's basically they have created a framework, but they require the infrastructure where to execute it, isn't it? So I just created a clustering framework like all these Spark libraries, but I need physical machines to run that. So for that, they just did a tie-up with both Azure as well as Amazon, AWS. So if you are a Azure user, so you can use Databricks over Azure, or if you are a AWS user, then you can use Databricks over AWS. Okay, so suppose you want to create a 10 node cluster. So these 10 nodes will be provided by AWS or Azure, and you will be paid, you will be billed accordingly. And Databricks will also charge you for using their framework. Okay, if you that means you are using paid version of the Databricks framework, so that will be charged separately. You can write a Spark program that can be executed on AWS EMR cluster or Azure SD Insight cluster. So you'll be billed by the Azure team itself or AWS team itself, whatever the bill is there. But if you're using Databricks framework on top of Azure and or AWS, then you'll be paying that much amount along with that Databricks billing also. But Databricks has created a framework which is very robust and very easy to use. Okay, they have done a lot of machine learning related integrations. The data engineering projects also can be created with very easy steps are there. So many vendors are still using Databricks on Azure or Databricks with AWS.
Okay, thank you, Siddharth.
Cool. Yeah. So let's see. So we'll try our first program that is called word count example. Okay, word count example is basically what it is. It's a hello world program in Spark, you can say. The objective here is basically, so in different analytics projects, if you have heard about it, like why these different e-commerce portals have the review section. The review sections to basically provide reviews to the product, okay, or the company. You're purchasing an iPhone 11. So what's your review? You find it interesting? You find it boring? It's worth spending this much of money? All this. So you put these reviews, and all these big companies you see, like there are some Samsung phones are there. They will see the number of reviews itself is in lakhs. Okay, so that means it's a great product. That means these businesses, they are taking their customers' feedback very seriously. Okay, people like their product or not like that product, they have to take it very seriously. Okay, so they launched one product. Their target is to basically make a very competitive price, make a feature rich phone, everything, so that people will like that product, so that they can come with the latest version, another latest version, and all. That's their business strategy. Okay, so to take the business, to take the reviews, what they have to do? Reviews are basically human readable text. We are writing some junk text. Maybe we are writing it's awesome, so we're writing it's cool, or basically some people use some different shortcuts to write anything. So how to make use of that data? Okay, they use a lot of analytics in the backend. Okay, they basically do all this stuff, like they read all these reviews and they find out all these words. Okay, single word phrases, 2 word phrases, 3 word phrases, because sometimes a single word is very abstract. Okay, so multiple words only make sense. Very good. Okay, if I write simply very doesn't mean anything. Very good or very bad. So that's when these two words will combinedly will make a sense, like either positive or negative. Similarly, sometimes three words combinedly will make sense. Okay, so all this kind of what happens, like these companies, what they do, so they read all these reviews and they create different one word reviews, two word phrases, three word phrases like that, and they identify and they create a dictionary like which word is positive, which phrase is positive, which is negative, which is neutral, and then they identify like overall review sentiments. The people are really positive or they're neutral or they're not happy. So they have to address this problem. If they're not happy, they have to address that in the next version of the product. Okay, or they have to basically improvise their software so that people can upgrade their device and they can get the latest features and all this. Okay, so that is there. So that means you can imagine like where you have like suppose in Amazon dot in Samsung M30 is having say 5 lakhs reviews. Okay, in say Samsung is not just selling that phone in India, they're also selling the same phone in US, in other countries. So that means you can imagine there are millions and billions of reviews are there. Okay, how to process that? They have to basically use a distributed computation framework to at least read the data and do some parsing and find out the one word, two word, three word phrases to basically identify the sentiments, customer sentiments. Okay, so we are not going into the analytical use case. As a data engineering thing, what problem we solve, let's go through that. Okay, suppose our job is to basically give them the document term matrix. Okay, we have to basically read the reviews and we have to find out which word is occurring how many times. Is good is appearing 10 times, or bad is appearing 5 times, or basically good is appearing 5 times, bad is appearing 5 times. So those kind of, we have to find out the frequency of each of these words. Okay, so somebody has given you a document. Okay, suppose the elements like say very good, okay, awesome, okay, like that, or bad, okay, very nice, okay, like that. We have different words are there. So what we have to do, so we have to take this so like that I have say some 8 reviews are there. So what I have to do, I have to find out the frequency of each of these words. Okay, so basically the output should be from this particular analysis. I should get like very is appearing twice, 4 times, and good is appearing 1, 2 times, awesome is appearing twice. What else? Bad is appearing twice, like that. Okay, nice is appearing twice, like that. Okay, this is the input and this is the output. Okay, the input is this part, like reading all these reviews, and output at this part. Okay, output as this to the second column. Okay, we have to basically write the Spark program. We'll be writing our first Spark program to find out this to do this particular analysis. Okay, so what are the steps we'll be following here? Okay, what are the steps we'll be following to achieve this? Okay, so this is a typical data transformation or ETL or basically data pipeline example. I have to write the code in order to find out this. Okay, so this is not just a one-step process. We have to solve it in different multiple steps. Okay, so first what I'll do, I'll basically split each of these words into different lists. Okay, so very good is split to a list of 2 words called very good. Okay, so then similarly this awesome, that means it's a single word called awesome. Bad is a single word. Very nice Then again, very good. Then again, awesome. Like that. I'm just writing the steps to solve this problem. Anybody having basic knowledge on Python? No, I'll not ask you questions, don't worry. Now
Yeah,
I basically,
Siddharth.
okay, then you will be helping me write the program. Okay, I'll be intentionally doing some mistakes and you have to help me. Okay, so let's see, like we just broken each of these sentences into these kind of words. Okay, so the second step will be flattening them up. Okay, I don't want to count the words in each sentence. Rather, I want to count the words in the entire document. Okay, so for that, I have to basically flatten them up. So it will become very, means very good is a list that will be converted into two records. One is called very and second one is called good, and then the third one is called awesome. Then the next one is bad. Okay, very good, awesome, very good, awesome, then bad, then again very nice, then again same thing. Okay, very good, awesome, bad, very nice, very good, awesome, bad, very nice. Okay, so I just flatten these words in the entire corpus, entire document. Now I'll just sorry. So post that I'll be basically adding a counter to each of these words. So I'll be saying very, counter is 1. Okay, I'll say again good, counter is 1. Then I will say awesome, count is 1. I will say bad, count is 1. Say again very, 1. Again nice, 1. So very, it's kind of like it's not a very logical program, just to show the syntax or to start with. I'm just writing, but projects, all this code will be real-time projects only. Then from next session onwards, we'll be doing some real data analysis. I'll share the Git link also, where the code is there. Okay, like that. So once I get all these words, okay, then simply I just need to apply a aggregation. Basically, I just need to apply a aggregation. So means you can see it's each and every record is a key value pair. Okay, each and every record is a key value pair. So what we'll be doing, we'll be aggregating basis the key and applying the aggregations to count the words. Okay, that's basically the objective here. Okay, so okay, so these are basically the steps we'll be following to solve this particular problem. So we'll be writing our first program. Okay, we'll be writing our first program to solve this. Okay, so every day, whatever text we are writing, just make sure just share it with everybody so that we have the examples available with us. Okay, actually it's not well. You can share it later. So what I'm doing, I'm creating a text file. Okay, I'll just create a text file and I'll basically upload it there. I'm creating a new file, my input file I'm just creating. The same file I'm just creating, I'll be uploading it. Sample.txt. So just to process this data, what I have to do, I have to basically upload this data to this notebook. Okay, there is a data section is there. Okay, as we discussed, like as a distributed file system or distributed storage. So Databricks provides its own distributed storage called DBFS, Databricks file system. Okay, so
Desktop.
yeah. Okay, I just uploaded this file. So now just imagine, like as we discussed, like the clustering software, like what we'll be using, it's called Yarn. We'll come to that later in details. For now, just imagine, just like you are executing a Java program, you require a JDK to be installed on your machine. You want to execute Python program, you require a Python kernel on your machine to execute. You want to execute a C program, you require the C compiler to execute it. Similarly, to execute Spark program, Hadoop program, Flink program, all these distributed frameworks, they run on top of the same environment called Yarn cluster. Okay, you have to install Yarn cluster on top of which you can run any of this distributed program. You can write, you can execute Spark, Flink, Hadoop, all these programs. Okay, the same program, same scenario what we discussed earlier. Here you install C, here Python kernel, here also you install Python, here you install Python. Then you are executing Python programs. But here I'm saying on top of this, you have installed Yarn cluster. These two systems are installed with Yarn cluster, and you have configured this IP address is the master, this is the worker. You again install Yarn cluster on all these three machines. You installed, you may configure this IP address is the master, these two are the workers, like that. Okay, you just installed, you just created a cluster like that. Okay, you created a cluster on top of which any of this distributed framework can execute. Spark, Hadoop, Flink, anything can execute. Okay, that's the whole idea here. And post that, what you are doing, that's basically the distributed computation framework concept is all about. So now what we are saying, like now this, once you install Yarn cluster, you have the entire 3 computers hosted with a new file system called HDFS, Hadoop Distributed File System. Okay, and here we are basically, we uploaded this file. This file is uploaded to HDFS only. Okay, Hadoop Distributed File System only. Let me copy this file URL and I'll go to workspace. Okay, just create a new notebook called, say, word count. It's saying language option, so Java, Scala. So Java is not there, Python, Scala, everything is there. I'm using Python, and it's saying cluster is, we have a single cluster, this test only. I'm selecting that and I'm creating a cluster. Okay, here basically you can write your Spark program. Okay, I want to read this data. Say the file is basically, I'm saying, I'm calling it text. I'm reading some text data. I'm creating a variable. Okay, so I'm reading this particular data. Text RDD is equal to Spark context dot text file. Okay, Spark context dot text file, and I'm providing this path, Control V. Okay, I just read this particular file system. Okay, I read this particular entire file, and I'm creating a RDD out of it. So what I'll be doing, so once I read this data, I will be trying to see. Okay, I follow the bottom-up approach. Okay, just bear with me. First, we'll write the program and then we'll execute what we did. Okay, it's a top down approach. First, write the program and then execute, then understand what we are doing. Okay, so just have patience. Okay, don't feel like we know nothing. What is RDD? What is this variable declaration? Nothing, and we directly jump into program. Trust me, this is the best approach. Okay, you anyway, if you just copy paste the same program, you just in your so while following this video, what you'll do, you simply just refer. You don't just copy this text and paste it. You write the code text underscore RDD equal to sc dot text file, put this path, then run this code and then execute. So it will be, so by typing the code itself, you will be more comfortable starting with the programming part. Okay, so just don't feel like I will not discuss anything and directly starting the program. But this is called top-down approach because we are all experienced folks. We are not in college. In college, we follow that approach. First, learn what is programming language, then what is variables, what is for loop, while loop, what is if-else statement, what is collection array. You learn that. You spend a month or two. Suppose you have your second semester having C programming. You spend some time, first learn what is programming, and then you start writing the program. That's the approach generally we follow. But here in but here in the real time, as an experienced person, if you follow that approach, it will take almost 6 months to learn. So rather, let's find out some more efficient way of learning. So we will learn by doing. First, write a program, and then we'll dissect that entire program word by word, and we'll execute. Okay, as I mentioned, like RDD, we have just discussed, like it's a 12-hour session. So today officially it's the day one. Yesterday it was the day zero session, right? So from today onwards, like I'll take another, including another 5 sessions, like another 10 hours to discuss the entire RDD part. Okay, so just bear with me. Okay, so we'll come with the great details. Just for now, just have patience and just understand like what we are trying to do. Okay, so first what we did, we just created a file. Okay, this is a distributed file which is distributed across hundreds of computers. Just hypothetically think like it's not just a single node cluster, rather it's a 100 node cluster, and this 100 node cluster is having this data sample.txt. It's not just a 1 KB file, rather it's a 100 terabytes of data. So it has been distributed across multiple computers. Once you upload this data to the SDFS file system, this data is scattered across all computers in bits and pieces, but it just created a single URL. Okay, it's saying once you upload this data, it's saying like it's a 100 TB data, but you can access this data through this URL. Okay, so we are writing a Spark program. We are reading this data to do some ETL, do some data transformations on that. Okay, so for that, what we did, we just simply read this data, and you can see we created a collection. Just for now, feel like you are just reading this data as a collection. This file is having 8 lines of text. 8 or 4 lines? 4 lines of text. I did a mistake there. Control C. Let's make it at least 8 lines so that we can get some count. You can re-upload it. It will override it. No worries. Oh, sorry, it just changed. It didn't override. It created a new file underscore -1. That's fine. I can go to recent. The file, whatever I've created, I can just change it here. Okay, so first time what I did, I just uploaded this file, and this file is scattered across this all 1,000 computers, and it can be accessed through a single URL, that is /filestore/table/sample-1.txt. Okay, so I'm reading this file and creating a collection out of it. Okay, just like collection means, you know, like list, set, map. So just feel like you're creating a list. Test RDD is nothing but a list, and you just read the first 2 records. Okay, first record is very good, and second record is awesome. Okay, and what we discussed, if you just follow the same example, I'll open test. So you just follow the same steps. First, you read this data, you are able to get all these records. Then you will be splitting them. Okay, you'll be splitting them together and create a list of all these words. Actually, I have to finish it in 10 minutes. I have another batch. So what I'm doing, say I'm creating words RDD is equal to text underscore RDD dot, yeah, exactly. Take is kind of pandas dot head. Okay, and let's not confuse other people. So it's kind of like this data I'm saying like it's 100 TB data, like it's having a billion records. So you will not be able to see the entire data in the console. You have to see one by one. Okay, so you can see a few record, a handful of record in the console. That's why I'm using take function to see the first two records of that data, how it looks like. Okay, text RDD. So I have a function called map. Map is a function to apply a transformation. Sorry. Map is a function to apply a transformation. So what I'll be doing, I'll be passing a function inside to split each of these words. Okay, say str underscore split is a function. I'll come to that in details. For now, just imagine you just created a list of all these sentences. These are sentences are nothing but strings, and those strings will be converted to words. Okay, each of this very good will be splitted to list of very comma good. This awesome will be converted to single list of single element called awesome, like that. This very nice will be splitted to a list of very comma nice. So this is one transformation, and transformations we apply it using this map function here. Okay, map function takes the transformation logic. Transformation logic here is called str split. So here in Python, I'll be defining a function. Okay, we'll come to that in details. In Python, we'll be discussing end-to-end details. But for now, just try to type the program. Okay, in the next session, you will say like how much confident you are. Like at least you will be comfortable saying, means I executed my first program by myself. That's the whole idea. And we'll slowly dissect this program word by word, and we'll explain what is RDD, what is this text file function, what is this SC variable is all about. Okay, how come this 10 TB file just mapped to a single name. Okay, what thing in the backend, how the data is getting organized. Okay, all these things we'll be discussing. str underscore split. This function will take variable, say each sentence calls a line, and I'm saying line dot split, and this sentence is basically this, each of these words are splitted through what you call splitted through space. So that's why I'm splitting it through space. So now I'll be seeing how my updated RDD updated list look like. Okay, how my updated list looks like. So now I can see why it is none comma none. Any idea? Any Python developer? Any Python developer here who can say why I'm getting none comma none first two records?
We need to pass the line.
Sorry?
You have to pass text.rdd, text underscore RDD.
Text RDD we have used here.
Oh, okay.
Are you returning that one?
Exactly. So we are basically missing the return
Next one.
statement. So every time
Okay.
you are basically want to return some value from the function, so you have to basically use the return keyword. You have to return this list. Exactly. Now you can see first sentence is broken into very good, and second one is basically awesome. Earlier we saw first sentence was very space good, and second sentence was a single word, that is awesome. Now you can see like you are getting all this list properly organized in this way. Now, so that means we got yeah, please.
See that one smaller. Basically, that delimiter comma you have not mentioned anywhere, right? So we don't have any.
No, it's not delimiter comma. So in what you call, when you are creating list in Python, suppose you are saying list of 1, 2, 3. Okay. So when even if you just print L, it will print like the elements in comma delimiter.
Okay.
Okay, it's just a list. Okay, you create list of numbers, list of strings. When you print them, it will print them by default comma delimited. Okay, but actually data is basically space delimited.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so for rest of the people, like as I basically committed everybody, so by the end of 4th session, I will make sure everybody able to write the program. Okay, how I'll do that, so that's up to me. But just have patience and be open up. Okay, nothing to shy out. If some person is asking question, I am feeling like I'm not able to ask the question, so nothing to hesitate, nothing to worry. Okay, trust me, like end of the day, the objective should be like we should all be able to write the program. And you know, like every other big data openings are coming full with hands-on. Okay, so there is no way, like we have to write the program. Let's take baby steps, like line by line. We'll write a very small program today, and you can see, like I'm writing one program, we are seeing the output. Again, another program, another line we'll be writing, and we'll be printing the output. So step by step we'll be going. Okay, so if you just remember the steps what we followed, we first read this data. Okay, each line is basically each sentence is basically a record, and then we are basically printing them. And then what we did, we splitted them through this list of words. So this part we completed. Now the next step is basically we have to unlist it. Okay, we don't have to keep the records as a list of words. Rather, you have to keep them as different words as different records. I had 8 records. 8 records got converted to 12 records here. So that part I just want to implement here. So again, I don't have to do anything extra. What I have to do, I simply, instead of map function, I'll change it to flat map function. Okay, and I will try to see the output. Now you can see I'm getting very good. If I just I want to print the first 5 words. So I can see the first 5 words, that is very good, awesome, bad, very, like that. Okay, so this part, okay, till this part we just flattened, or we just unlisted this smaller list, because we want to get the count of each of these words in the entire document. So that's why we did in this way. We first unlisted them, and then we have to append a counter 1. Okay, we just have to append a counter 1, and that will basically help us, like adding counter to each of these words. So later we can basically apply some aggregation. That's the whole idea here. Okay, that's basically what I want to implement here. Okay, I'll go here. So I'm creating another variable, say word pair is equal to, say, words RDD. Say word pair RDD is equal to word pair dot map function. Map function is used to apply transformations to each and every record. So I'm defining any functions, a random function, say word pair or XYZ, anything we can do. Then basically I'm defining a function def word pair. It will take each word and it will basically return what? It will return a tuple of the same word, comma 1. Okay, so let's see the output. Cool. Each of these word is now converted to word, comma 1 pair. Okay, now kind of like 50% thing is done. 70% of thing is done. I just need to apply an aggregation. Okay, so I just need to apply aggregation. So I'm saying, say, word count RDD is equal to word pair RDD dot, for applying aggregations, we have a function called reduce by key. So we have a function called reduce by key function, and inside that, say I'm passing a function called, say, addition. Okay, I'll be defining a function, say def addition. It will take 2 parameters, say n1 n2, to add it up, and I'm mentioning return n1 plus n2. Okay, so now word count RDD dot take 5. Getting a point? I just took the elements and I just want to find out the sum of this. This is basically the final output what I'm looking for. Okay, vary 4 times, good 2 times, awesome 2 times, nice 2 times, like that. Okay, so in a very summary, like what to summarize this, what I'm saying, we first read this data. We have 100 TB of data available in HDFS, and we just read this and created a collection. It's a special type of collection called RDD. We'll come to that. The next 4 sessions will be whole discussions around RDDs only. So first I write the program what is using RDD. Then we'll be discussing what is RDD, how to create RDD, how to apply transformations, what are the different transformations are there, Once you submit a Spark application in the backend, how these codes are getting executed. All these things we'll be discussing one by one. Some people who have already visited my YouTube videos, Spark with Scala, you might have seen like first I explain this, then I dissect the program into word by word and then explain. So it will be very easy for you to understand. Okay. First, I'll just ask you, just everybody just write this program. Okay. Write this program by your own. Just type it word by word and execute it. You'll be completely in a different satisfaction level. You'll feel like I'm already written our program. So that's right. Like we keep on writing programs. We uh, we we be comfortable. We be in a comfortable position and then go to the next concept. Okay. Abhishek is asking explain function and interrelation as well as later. Yeah, sure. So in Python, we have 8 hours of session, like 4 sessions. We'll discuss how to declare a variable. Okay, here you see, here in Python, we declare a variable like this variable name equal to some expression. In Scala, we say var variable name equal to some expression. In Java, you say int x equal to some value. Different programming languages are having different syntax. Okay, so here we are defining the function in this def keyword, function name, parameter list, and Python doesn't have return type. In Scala, you mentioned the exact same way, def str split within parentheses, line colon string. Okay, so that is basically the parameter, and the function itself, you put again another colon, then mention the return type, that is array of string. Okay, in Java, you mention say function name str split and str split within parentheses int or basically string line. Then you return. So you mention like array of string str split and you pass line colon string. In different languages, we have different syntax to define a function. Here in Python, this is the syntax. A def keyword, function name, parameter list, no return statement here. But in the function body, you write the function body and the last line should be the return statement. Okay, like that. So that's right, like we'll discuss all these things. What is functions, what is loops? There are 2 loops, for loop, while loop here in Python, then the generators, comprehensions. Okay, then the oops concepts like class, object, okay, class, functions, then what you call decorators. Okay, then collections like list, set, map, tuple, everything we'll be discussing. Okay, so whatever things required for a Spark programmer, all these things, as I mentioned, high level means top down. First we execute it, and then in the Python sessions we'll be discussing what are each of these parts there. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, don't just give up like saying, yeah, this is a 15-line program, I'll not be able to digest. Trust me, manual testing people, I can connect you 5 manual testing people, they have already cleared interview. Okay, so don't feel like you're a non-programmer, you'll not be able to grasp it. Just bear with me. Just whatever programs you're executing daily, just be honest with yourself. Try typing the same program by your own, then just tell me like what's your thing. Anyway, as I mentioned, like 4 or 5 sessions you can join for free to basically assess like, are you able to grasp the concept, are you able to write the program by your own. Just give a time. Okay, give some time to yourself and then make a decision. Okay, don't just be in hurry like no, program is something, it's not there, I promised I will never write a single line of program in my life. No, not like that. Okay, don't be in that mindset, just be comfortable. We'll be writing programs slowly, small programs, and then we'll go to tricky programs. Okay, so just trying to basically, I'm just trying to assure you, just have some patience. Okay, by the end of 4 sessions, I'll guarantee you everybody will be able to write the program. Okay, so don't worry. Okay, so yeah, so that's how I'll basically define the function, and we discuss like how to apply the ETL, how to apply transformations and all. Okay, so yeah, Abhishek is asking like can't relate this split. So line is basically nothing but in this particular input what you saw. So each input line is basically a statement. This is a statement. Okay, this is a sentence. This is a sentence. This is a sentence. These are different sentences. I want to split them. Okay, I want to extract the words out of it. Abhishek is asking like how you use split. So my first sentence is very space good, and I want to extract these words very and good out of it. How I'll be doing? By looking at this sentence itself, I can know these 2 words. Like in sentence is nothing but a collection of words, right? So these words are separated with space. Okay, this is normal English we are using, or any language what you follow, the words are separated by space. So what I'm doing, so you are mentioning line dot split means this entire highlighted part dot split, and I'm giving a space in between. Okay, you see like I'm giving a space in between. That means split all this, split the sentence through this space delimiter. Okay, a sentence is a space delimited word, so that's why I'm using space delimiter here. So it will basically give you a list of all these wars. That's the whole idea. Okay, we'll discuss in details. Okay, we'll discuss all these things. Whatever things I mentioned in my website and I shown you yesterday, all these things along with some advanced concepts like decorators, generators, comprehensions, and pandas data frame also I'll be explaining you, because later we'll be using data frame, Sparks data frame. So Sparks data frame is a distributed data frame and pandas data frame is a standalone data frame. So all these discussions we'll be having. So that's the approach I follow, like top-down approach. First, ask the senior experienced folks to write some program, okay, without understanding. So while writing the program itself, we'll be learning a lot of stuff. So instead of split, you'll be writing capital S. Instead of writing flat map, you'll be writing small s small m, or capital S capital M. You will do those mistakes, and you will see it will fail, and you'll be rectifying it, and you will be moving to the next step. Like that, that's also learning. Okay, so just spend some time. Okay, we'll again connect Thursday morning 7 o'clock. So
Hello.
just practice. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so we can also use the counter, like from in Python you have the collections counter, so you can also use that, but you are just trying to demonstrate using Spark, right? These
Exactly,
functions,
we are using Spark.
reduce by
I'm not
key, map and stuff.
exactly. So don't feel
Okay.
and just don't feel like this data is basically what you are writing is having 4 lines, because the file what I shown you here in this example, it's having 8 lines. But just feel like this is not a 8 lines file, rather it's a 8 billion lines file. Okay, which cannot be written using normal pandas data frame. That's why we are using Spark RDD to solve this. Okay, so obviously I'll not be able to write 8 billion lines here because we have only 15 GB RAM. So we have to basically, I'm just creating mock examples, but slowly we'll relate it with the bigger picture. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's all for today. So any last questions to wrap it up? Okay, if no question, then we can wrap it up. I have another batch. I'm already 6 minutes late. So just keep practicing. I'll share the recordings with you, and feel free to ping me if you have any queries and all. We'll again connect on Thursday.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for your time
Thank
again.
you.
Really appreciate. Thanks everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.